Willow Zimmerman stared at her reflection in the dusty mirror of her modest Colorado homestead, her fingers tracing the letter in her hands, a doctor's confirmation of what she had suspected for years. Barren, a word that in 1878 might as well have been a death sentence for a woman's hopes of love and family. The morning sun filtered through calico curtains she'd sewn with her own hands, illuminating a cabin that was as empty of laughter as her womb was of life. At 26, Willow had watched as one by one, the women of Silver Creek had married and filled their homes with children, while she remained alone. Her late husband, Thomas, had left her 2 years prior, not by choice, but by the cruel hand of pneumonia that had swept through town. Before his passing, the whispers had already begun about their childless union, rumors that had only grown louder in her widowhood. Willow folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her apron pocket. The homestead was hers, 10 acres of stubborn land that she worked alone, growing enough to feed herself, and occasionally sell surplus vegetables in town. It was a life, but a hollow one, devoid of the family she had always dreamed would fill the 2 extra bedrooms Thomas had built with such hopeful hands. The small town of Silver Creek lay 3 miles east of her property, nestled in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. It was a place where everyone knew everyone's business, where a woman without a husband was pitied, and a woman without children was somehow less than whole. Willow pulled on her worn boots and headed outside to tend to her meager livestock. 2 milk cows, a handful of chickens, and an elderly horse named Clover. The work kept her hands busy while her mind wrestled with the confirmation of what she had long feared. The doctor in Denver had been kind but blunt. There would be no children for Willow Zimmerman, ever. As she finished the morning chores, the distant sound of hoofbeats caught her attention. Visitors were rare at her isolated homestead, and Willow instinctively reached for the rifle that hung by the door before stepping onto the porch. A cloud of dust preceded the arrival of 3 riders. At the front was Sheriff Miller, his gray mustache unmistakable even at a distance. Beside him rode Mrs. Eleanor Parsons, the town's most notorious gossip and self-appointed moral guardian. The 3rd rider, a stranger to Willow, sat tall on a magnificent chestnut stallion. "Morning, Mrs. Zimmerman," the sheriff called as they approached. "Hope we're not disturbing you too early." Willow set the rifle down, but kept it within reach. "Not at all, Sheriff. What brings you out this way?" Mrs. Parsons sniffed disapprovingly at Willow's practical trousers and loose blouse. "We've brought your new neighbor to introduce himself properly," seemed the Christian thing to do. The stranger dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark blonde hair fell in waves beneath a well-worn Stetson, and when he removed his hat and bowed slightly in her direction, Willow felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Preston Garrett, madam. I've purchased the old Morrison place to the west of yours." His voice was deep with a slight Texas drawl. "Thought I should pay my respects to my closest neighbor." The Morrison Ranch had been abandoned for nearly 3 years, its previous owners having given up on the harsh Colorado terrain and headed back east. It was a large spread, over 300 acres, with good water access, but requiring a strong back and stronger will to make it profitable. "Mrs. Zimmerman is our town widow," Mrs. Parsons interjected before Willow could respond. "Poor dear's been managing alone since Thomas passed. Not very successfully, I might add." Willow's cheeks burned with humiliation. "My farm provides everything I need, Mrs. Parsons." Sheriff Miller cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, we just wanted to make proper introductions. Mr. Garrett here came highly recommended from his previous town in Texas. Brought a herd of fine cattle with him and plans to establish a proper ranch." Preston Garrett's eyes never left Willow's face, seeming to see past Mrs. Parsons' cruel assessment to something deeper. "I believe Mrs. Zimmerman's place looks well tended to me. Takes grit to manage alone in these parts." The simple defense, offered so casually, caught Willow off guard. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken up for her. "Yes, well," Mrs. Parsons huffed. "We should be on our way. Sunday service is at 10 o'clock sharp, Mr. Garrett. We expect all decent folk to attend." As they prepared to leave, Preston Garrett lingered. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I expect I'll need some guidance about local conditions. Would it be an imposition to call on you again, perhaps tomorrow?" Before Willow could answer, Mrs. Parsons cut in. Mr. Garrett, a single man calling on a widow without proper chaperonage would cause talk. Perhaps you could speak with her at church on Sunday instead. For the first time, a flash of steel showed in Preston Garrett's eyes. With all due respect, madam, I'm 32 years old and haven't needed a chaperone since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I'll be discussing cattle and water rights, not proposing marriage. Sheriff Miller chuckled, earning a glare from Mrs. Parsons. Leave the man be, Eleanor. Not everyone in Silver Creek lives by your rulebook. After they departed, Willow remained on the porch, watching the dust settle in their wake. Something about Preston Garrett disturbed her carefully constructed solitude, a dangerous thing for a woman who had resigned herself to a life alone. The next day, true to his word, Preston Garrett returned. This time he came alone, riding that magnificent chestnut stallion and leading a pack horse laden with supplies. Willow was in the garden, wrestling with stubborn weeds when he approached. Mrs. Zimmerman, he called, removing his hat as he dismounted. I hope this isn't an inconvenient time. Willow stood, brushing soil from her hands. Mr. Garrett, I didn't expect you so soon. Please, call me Preston. He tied his horses to the hitching post. I bring gifts to sweeten my request for neighborly advice. From the pack horse, he produced a sack of coffee beans, a tin of hard candies, and, most surprisingly, a packet of vegetable seeds. I noticed your garden yesterday, he explained, handing her the seeds. These are a drought-resistant tomato variety from California. Thought they might do well here. The thoughtfulness of the gift caught Willow off guard. It had been so long since anyone had considered her needs or interests. Thank you. That's very kind. Preston glanced around her property with an appraising eye. You've done well with this place. The Morrison land is in far worse shape, barns half collapsed, and the house isn't much better. The Morrisons weren't cut out for frontier life, Willow replied, leading him toward the porch. Water runs scarce in summer, and winters here can be brutal. So I've heard. That's partly why I wanted to speak with you. He followed her up the steps, but hesitated at the door. Perhaps we could talk out here? I wouldn't want to give Mrs. Parsons any more ammunition against your reputation. Despite herself, Willow smiled. Mrs. Parsons already believes I'm beyond redemption, but the porch is fine. Would you like some coffee? Over steaming cups of coffee, Preston outlined his plans for the Morrison Ranch. He'd brought 50 head of longhorn cattle from Texas, intended to build the herd to 3 times that size, and had ideas about introducing hardier grass varieties for grazing. He spoke with the confidence of a man who knew his business, but also listened attentively to Willow's insights about the local challenges. The creek that runs through both our properties dries to a trickle by August, she explained. You'll need to dig a deeper well, or build a reservoir to see your cattle through late summer. Preston nodded, jotting notes in a small leather-bound book. That's exactly the kind of information I need. The land agent in Denver painted a rosier picture than reality, it seems. Land agents rarely mention drought or blizzards, Willow said wryly. They're selling dreams, not truth. Preston's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. And what dreams brought you to Silver Creek, Mrs. Zimmerman? The question, asked so directly, made Willow pause. My husband's dreams, initially. Thomas believed we could build something here. She looked away toward the distant mountains. I stayed because this land is all I have left. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft nickering of Preston's horses. Finally, he said, I lost someone too. My wife Sarah, 5 years ago. Childbirth. The pain in his voice was old but still evident. I'm sorry, Willow said softly. And the child? My daughter Lily survived. She's with my sister in Denver while I get the ranch habitable. She's 5 now, full of questions and mischief. Pride warmed his voice. Willow felt a familiar ache in her chest. A child. The one blessing she would never know. Unconsciously, her hand moved to her apron pocket where the doctor's letter remained. Preston noticed the gesture. I've said something to upset you. No, Willow said quickly. It's just, you're fortunate to have a daughter. I am, he agreed, though raising her alone hasn't been easy. My sister can't keep her indefinitely, which means I need to establish a proper home quickly. He finished his coffee and stood. Which brings me to another reason for my visit. I'd like to hire you. Willow blinked in surprise. Hire me for what? Advice, primarily, knowledge of local conditions, suppliers, which merchants in town are honest. And perhaps some practical help. He gestured toward her garden. You clearly know how to coax life from this stubborn soil. I'll pay fair wages. The offer was unexpected but not unwelcome. Willow's finances were tight, and extra income would provide security through the coming winter. Still, she hesitated. The townspeople will talk. Preston's expression hardened slightly. Let them. I need help. You could use the money, and I suspect we both value practicality over gossip. Put so plainly, Willow found it difficult to argue. Very well, Mr. Garrett, I accept your offer. Preston, he corrected with a smile. And may I call you Willow? Something in the way he said her name, like it was something precious, made her breath catch. Yes, you may. As Preston prepared to leave, he hesitated. Sunday service. Will you be there? Willow rarely attended church anymore, tired of the pitying glances and whispered comments. I hadn't planned to. Come, he said simply. Sit with Lily and me. It might silence some of the gossips if they see we're nothing more than neighbors conducting business. After he left, Willow found herself standing in the doorway of one of the empty bedrooms Thomas had built. She tried to imagine a child there, a little girl, with Preston's blue eyes perhaps. The thought startled her, and she quickly closed the door. Such daydreams were dangerous for a woman who could never bear children. Sunday arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze. Willow dressed in her best dress, a modest navy blue with white lace at the collar and cuffs. It had been Thomas's favorite, though it hung looser on her frame now, after 2 years of hard work and simple meals. She pinned her auburn hair in a neat bun and added her only piece of jewelry, a simple gold cross that had belonged to her mother. The 3-mile journey to town felt longer than usual, her thoughts racing ahead to the reception she might receive. It had been nearly 2 months since she'd attended services, and the town's memory was long. Silver Creek's white clapboard church stood at the edge of town, its spire visible for miles across the prairie. As Willow approached, she saw Preston's chestnut stallion tied alongside other horses at the hitching post. Taking a deep breath, she secured Clover and smoothed her skirts before climbing the church steps. Inside, the congregation had already begun to gather. Willow felt the weight of curious stares as she entered, head held high despite her racing heart. Near the front, Preston sat with a small girl beside him. As if sensing Willow's presence, he turned and spotted her, raising a hand in greeting. The little girl beside him, Lily, Willow presumed, followed her father's gaze. She was a beautiful child, with her father's blonde hair and bright blue eyes. When Preston gestured for Willow to join them, Lily scooted over eagerly. Mrs. Zimmerman, Preston said formally as she approached, aware of the listening ears around them. May I present my daughter, Lily? Lily, this is our neighbor, Mrs. Zimmerman. Hello, Lily said, her small face serious. Papa says you grow the best vegetables in Colorado. Willow couldn't help but smile. Your father is being kind. I'm very pleased to meet you, Lily. As she took her seat beside them, Willow was acutely aware of Mrs. Parsons watching from across the aisle, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Other familiar faces showed varying degrees of surprise and curiosity. It had been a long time since Willow Zimmerman had been the subject of interest rather than pity. The service proceeded as usual, with Reverend Adams delivering a sermon on community and Christian charity. Willow found it difficult to concentrate, distracted by Lily's small hand occasionally touching her arm as the child whispered questions or observations. The simple, innocent contact stirred something deep within Willow, a longing she had tried to bury. After the service, as congregants gathered outside to socialize, Willow found herself surrounded by neighbors who had avoided her for months. Their sudden interest was transparent. They wanted information about the handsome newcomer and his connection to the widow Zimmerman. We've missed you at the Ladies' Aid Society meetings, Martha Johnson said, though Willow knew perfectly well she'd never been invited to join. Mr. E. Garrett seems quite taken with Silver Creek already, added Betty Williams. Such a handsome man, and with that poor motherless child, too. Before Willow could respond, Preston appeared at her side, Lily's hand firmly in his. Ladies, he greeted them with a tip of his hat. I hope you don't mind if I steal Mrs. Zimmerman away. We have some business matters to discuss. The women's eyebrows rose in unison. Business on the Lord's Day? Mrs. Parsons had materialized, her disapproval palpable. Preston smiled easily. The Lord's work includes ensuring a child has a proper home, Mrs. Parsons. Mrs. Zimmerman has kindly agreed to help me prepare the Morrison place for Lily's arrival. As they walked away, Lily skipping between them, Willow murmured, "You've just provided them with a week's worth of gossip." Preston's laugh was warm and genuine. "Good. Let them talk about something new for a change." He stopped by his horse. "Would you and Lily like to come see the ranch? I could use your opinion on where to plant a kitchen garden." Lily looked up at Willow with hopeful eyes. "Please come. Papa says I can have chickens when I move in." How could she refuse such an earnest invitation? "I'd be happy to," Willow said, smiling at the child's enthusiasm. The Morrison Ranch lay 3 miles west of Willow's homestead, its weathered buildings visible from the main road. As they approached, Willow could see that Preston hadn't exaggerated the property's condition. The main house, a substantial 2-story structure that had once been the pride of the valley, now stood with sagging porch and missing shingles. The barn listed dangerously to one side, and what had once been fertile fields had gone to weeds and wild grasses. "It looks worse than I remembered," Willow said, as Preston helped her down from her horse. "It's nothing that hard work won't fix," he replied confidently. "The bones are good. Come, let me show you what I've done so far." For the next hour, Preston led Willow and Lily through the property, pointing out completed repairs and outlining his plans. He'd already replaced several supporting beams in the barn and repaired the roof of the main house. Inside, the house was surprisingly clean, with new glass in the windows and fresh paint on the walls of several rooms. "This will be my room," Lily announced, leading Willow into a small bedroom where a child-sized bed already stood. "Papa says I can choose the color for the walls myself." "It's a lovely room," Willow said, noting the western exposure that would fill the space with afternoon light. "Perfect for a growing girl." Preston watched from the doorway, his expression softening as he observed the interaction between Willow and his daughter. "I thought we might plant the kitchen garden outside the south window," he said. "The soil there seems richest." Willow followed him outside to inspect the proposed garden site. "You've chosen well. This area gets good sun but is sheltered from the worst of the wind." She knelt to examine the soil. "You'll need to add manure and turn it thoroughly before planting, but yes, this could be very productive." As they walked the property, discussing improvements and plans, Lily darted ahead, collecting wildflowers and chattering about the animals she hoped to keep. Watching her, Willow felt that familiar ache intensify. This vibrant child, so full of life and possibility, represented everything Willow had been denied. "She's wonderful," Willow said softly. "You've done well raising her alone." Preston's gaze followed his daughter. "I've done my best, but she needs more than I can give her alone." "A child needs a mother's touch." He glanced at Willow. "I've been meaning to ask if you're willing. Could you spend time with her when she moves here permanently? She's never had much female influence besides my sister." The request was so unexpected that Willow stopped walking. "You want me to... what exactly?" Preston looked uncomfortable for the first time since they'd met. "I'm not explaining this well. I thought perhaps you could teach her things a father can't: sewing, cooking, the womanly arts. I'd pay you, of course." Willow felt a complicated mix of emotions, flattery at being trusted with his child, pain at the reminder of what she could never have, and something else she couldn't quite name. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that role, Preston." "Why not?" His direct gaze made it difficult to look away. "You're kind, capable, and Lily already likes you. What more qualifications are needed?" The letter in her pocket seemed to burn against her skin. "There are plenty of women in town who would be better suited. Women with children of their own." "I'm not asking those women. I'm asking you." His voice softened. "Is it because of Thomas? Are you still grieving?" Willow shook her head. "No, it's not that. I love Thomas. But I've made my peace with his passing." She took a deep breath. "It's just... complicated." Before Preston could press further, Lily came running back, her hands full of wildflowers. "For you," she said, presenting the bouquet to Willow with a smile that revealed a missing front tooth. How could Willow refuse this child anything? "Thank you, Lily. They're beautiful." She accepted the flowers, then looked up at Preston. "I'll help with Lily, but let's be clear about the arrangement before she moves in permanently." Relief washed over Preston's face. "Of course, whatever terms you want to set." The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. 3 days a week, Willow rode to the Morrison Ranch, now being called the Double G by Preston, to help with repairs and preparations for Lily's arrival. Preston proved to be a hard worker, with considerable skills in carpentry and animal husbandry. Under his hands, the barn was straightened and reinforced, the house repaired room by room, and the kitchen garden planted with Willow's guidance. On the days Willow didn't come to the ranch, Preston often appeared at her homestead in the late afternoon, sometimes bringing supplies from town or offering help with heavier tasks. Despite Mrs. Parsons' dire predictions, their working relationship remained strictly professional, though Willow couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt in Preston's company. As July turned to August, Preston announced that his sister would be bringing Lily to stay permanently the following week. "The house is ready enough," he told Willow as they finished painting the kitchen. "She needs stability, a place to call home before winter comes." Willow stepped back to admire their work, fresh cream-colored paint brightening what had been a dark, dreary room. "She'll be happy here. You've created a real home." Preston set down his paintbrush and turned to face her. "I couldn't have done it without your help, Willow. Not just the practical assistance, but—" He hesitated, searching for words. "Having you here made it feel possible, like a real home, not just a house." The intensity in his eyes made Willow look away. Over the weeks, she'd become increasingly aware of her feelings for Preston, feelings that went far beyond neighborly friendship. But the doctor's letter, which she carried with her always as a reminder, held her back from acknowledging these feelings even to herself. "I should go," she said abruptly. "It's getting late, and I have animals to tend to." Preston walked her to her horse, his expression thoughtful. "Will you come for dinner tomorrow, to welcome Lily? My sister Margaret will be staying overnight before returning to Denver." "I don't think that would be appropriate," Willow said carefully. "The town already has enough to gossip about with our working arrangement." "To hell with what the town thinks," Preston said with sudden vehemence. "You're important to Lily, and to me." The words hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Willow mounted her horse, needing distance. "I'll think about it." That night, alone in her cabin, Willow took out the doctor's letter and read it again, though she knew every word by heart. Complete infertility, unlikely to ever conceive, condition from birth. The clinical language did nothing to soften the devastating reality. What did she have to offer a man like Preston Garrett? He already had the one thing she could never give him: a child. And despite his dismissal of town gossip, Willow knew the reality of frontier life. A man needed sons to help build his legacy, to work the land and carry on his name. Preston might not realize it now, but eventually he would want more children, children she could never provide. The next day, Willow avoided riding to the Double G ranch. Instead, she threw herself into work on her own property, weeding the garden with unnecessary vigor and cleaning the cabin until every surface shone. By late afternoon, she had run out of tasks, but not nervous energy. The sound of an approaching wagon made her heart race. Through the window, she saw Preston driving, with a woman who must be his sister beside him, and Lily bouncing excitedly in the back. They weren't stopping, merely passing by on the road that connected their properties, but Preston raised his hand in greeting when he spotted her watching. Before she could think better of it, Willow grabbed her shawl and hurried outside, waving them down. The wagon came to a halt, and Lily's delighted squeal warmed something deep inside Willow. "Mrs. Zimmerman, Papa said you might not come today, but I told him you wouldn't miss my homecoming." The child's absolute certainty made Willow's throat tighten. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she said, surprising herself with the truth of the words. Preston's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Willow, this is my sister, Margaret Garrett. Margaret, my neighbor, Mrs. Willow Zimmerman." Margaret Garrett was a handsome woman in her late 30s, with the same blue eyes as her brother, but darker hair streaked with silver. "So you're the miracle worker who's helped my brother transform that wreck of a ranch," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I've heard nothing but praise for you in his letters." Willow shook her hand, feeling oddly shy. "Your brother exaggerates. He's done most of the work himself. Will you come with us? Lily pleaded. Aunt Margaret brought a chocolate cake from Denver, and Papa killed a chicken for supper. How could she refuse? I'd be delighted, Willow said, ignoring the voice of caution in her head. Let me just secure the animals, and I'll follow on horseback. Dinner at the Double G Ranch was a livelier affair than Willow had experienced in years. Margaret proved to be witty and kind, regaling them with stories of Denver society that had them all laughing. Lily, excited by her new home and the presence of guests, chattered constantly, showing Willow every new feature of the house as if she'd built it herself. After dinner, as they sat on the newly repaired porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson, Margaret drew Willow aside while Preston helped Lily feed the chickens in the new coop. My brother thinks very highly of you, Margaret said without preamble. I haven't seen him this animated since Sarah died. Willow watched Preston lift Lily onto his shoulders so she could peek into a high nest box. He's a good man, and Lily is a treasure. Yes, they are, Margaret agreed, which is why I worry about them out here alone. Preston's always been independent, but raising a daughter properly requires, well, a woman's touch. Willow tensed. I've agreed to help teach Lily some things that girls should know. Margaret studied her face. That's not what I meant, and I think you know it. She sighed. Forgive my directness, Mrs. Zimmerman, but I'm returning to Denver tomorrow, and I need to know my family will be all right. Preston doesn't speak of it, but I know he's lonely. And the way he looks at you. Mrs. Garrett. Margaret, please. Margaret, Willow amended. I think you've misunderstood the nature of our relationship. Your brother hired me to help prepare the ranch. That's all. Margaret's skeptical expression made it clear she didn't believe this. If you say so. But I've known my brother all his life, and I recognize the signs when he cares for someone. She patted Willow's hand. Just don't break his heart. That's all I ask. He's had enough sorrow. The conversation left Willow unsettled. As the evening progressed and Lily was finally persuaded to go to bed despite her excitement, Willow prepared to leave. Preston insisted on escorting her home, despite her protests that she knew the way perfectly well. It's not about you getting lost, he said as he saddled his horse. It's about propriety. What would Mrs. Parsons say if she knew I let you ride home alone after dark? The teasing reference to their nemesis made Willow smile despite her churning thoughts. Mrs. Parsons would likely say it was improper for you to escort me home at all. Then she'd be wrong twice, Preston said easily. Ready? The night was clear, a 3/4 moon providing ample light for their journey. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the steady hoofbeats of their horses and the chorus of crickets in the tall grass. Lily adores you, Preston said finally. She talked of nothing else for weeks before coming here. The nice lady who's teaching Papa to grow tomatoes, she called you. Willow smiled in the darkness. She's a special child. You've raised her well. I've done my best, Preston replied, but a girl needs more than I can give her alone. He cleared his throat. Willow, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. The serious tone made Willow's heart beat faster. Yes? I've come to value your friendship enormously these past weeks. More than friendship, if I'm being honest. He guided his horse closer to hers. I know it might seem sudden, but life out here doesn't allow for lengthy courtships. I'm 32 years old, I know my own mind, and I believe you might feel something for me, too. Willow's hands tightened on the reins. Preston, please, let me finish. His voice was steady but urgent. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just for you to consider the possibility of a future together. Lily needs a mother, and I find myself thinking of you constantly. They had reached Willow's homestead, the small cabin silhouetted against the night sky. Preston dismounted and came to help Willow down, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary. In the moonlight, his face was a study in earnest hope. You don't know everything about me, Willow said softly. There are things, limitations. Preston stepped closer. Then tell me, whatever it is, we can face it together. The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. It would be so easy to lean into his strength, to accept the future he offered, but the letter in her pocket weighed like a stone. I can't have children, Willow blurted out, the words sharp and painful in the quiet night. I'm barren. The doctor in Denver confirmed it. I'll never be able to give you more children, Preston. Never. She expected him to step back, to reconsider, his expression to change from hope to disappointment. Instead, he reached for her hand, enfolding it in his larger one. Is that all? He asked gently. Is that what's been troubling you these past weeks? Willow stared at him in disbelief. Isn't it enough? You'll want more children someday. Sons to help with the ranch, to carry on your name. Preston shook his head. Willow, I already have the greatest blessing a man could ask for in Lily. If God grants us no more children, I would still count myself fortunate to have you as my wife. His hand moved to cup her cheek. I'm not asking you to be a breeding mare. I'm asking you to be my partner, my companion, Lily's mother. Tears welled in Willow's eyes. You can't mean that. Not really. Every man wants sons. What I want, Preston said firmly, is you, just as you are. The woman who stood up to Mrs. Parsons, who taught me how to coax vegetables from this stubborn soil, who made my daughter smile again after months of uncertainty. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. You're mine, Willow Zimmerman, if you'll have me. The simple declaration, you're mine, pierced through years of doubt and self-recrimination. In that moment, Willow allowed herself to believe that perhaps her worth wasn't measured by her ability to bear children, but by who she was and what she could give to a man who saw her truly, saw her and wanted her anyway. I need time, she whispered. To be sure. Preston nodded, though reluctance was clear in his expression. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. He stepped back, respecting her space. May I call on you properly tomorrow, with Lily? Willow nodded, not trusting her voice. As Preston mounted his horse and prepared to leave, he looked back at her, silhouetted in her doorway. Good night, Willow. Dream of possibilities. The next morning dawned clear and bright, matching Willow's mood. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future different from the lonely existence she had resigned herself to. Preston's words echoed in her mind as she completed her morning chores with unusual energy. By mid-morning, she had baked fresh bread and apple tarts, cleaned the cabin again, and changed her dress twice. When the sound of approaching horses finally came around noon, she had to force herself to wait a respectable moment before opening the door. Preston and Lily made a charming picture as they dismounted the tall, handsome rancher and his pixie-like daughter, both dressed in their Sunday best, despite it being a Tuesday. Lily carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, and Preston held his hat respectfully in his hands. Mrs. Zimmerman, he said formally, though his eyes twinkled with private meaning. Miss Lily and I have come to invite you to dine with us this evening, if you'd be so kind as to accept. Lily stepped forward, presenting the flowers with a small curtsy that was clearly recently practiced. Please say yes, Mrs. Zimmerman. Papa and I made a special dessert. Willow accepted the flowers with exaggerated gravity. I would be delighted to accept your invitation. She smiled at Lily. And you must call me Willow, sweetheart. Mrs. Zimmerman sounds so formal among friends. Are you going to marry my papa? Lily asked suddenly, causing both adults to freeze. Preston recovered first. Lily, that's not an appropriate question. The little girl looked unrepentant. But Aunt Margaret said you were sweet on Willow, and that's why we got all dressed up today. Willow couldn't help but laugh at Preston's mortified expression. Your Aunt Margaret is very perceptive, she told Lily. But these things take time. How much time? Lily persisted. Before winter? Because Papa said the snow gets real deep here. And it would be better if you lived with us instead of all alone when it snows. Lily, that's enough, Preston said firmly, though his cheeks had reddened slightly. Why don't you go see if the chickens have laid any eggs while Willow and I talk? When Lily had skipped off toward the chicken coop, Preston turned to Willow with an apologetic smile. I'm sorry about that. She has her mother's directness. It's all right, Willow assured him. Children should speak their minds. She hesitated, then added, She seems very accepting of the idea of us. Preston's expression grew serious. I talked with her this morning. Explained that I care deeply for you and hope you might become part of our family someday. She was thrilled with the idea. And if I can't give her siblings? Willow had to ask, needed to be certain he understood. She's already told me she wants a puppy instead, Preston said with a smile that faded into earnestness. Willow, I meant what I said last night. Your worth isn't measured by your ability to bear children. I want you, your strength, your kindness, your practical wisdom. He took her hands in his. I love you. I think I have since that first day when you stood on your porch with a rifle, ready to defend your home. The declaration, spoken so simply and directly, broke something loose inside Willow. Years of shame and inadequacy seemed to dissolve in the warmth of his gaze. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling both foreign and perfectly right on her lips. But I'm afraid. What if you change your mind? What if it's not enough? Preston stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the clean scent of soap and sunshine that clung to his skin. It's already more than enough. You're more than enough. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home gentle at first, then deepening with a promise of passion and partnership that took her breath away. Willow leaned into him, allowing herself to believe that this man, this impossible, wonderful man, truly wanted her just as she was. They were interrupted by a delighted squeal. Lily stood watching them, her small hands clasped together in excitement. Does this mean you're going to be my mama now? Willow looked at Preston, saw the love and certainty in his eyes, and made her decision. Kneeling down to Lily's level, she opened her arms. Would you like that, sweetheart? If I became your mama? Lily launched herself into Willow's embrace with such force that they nearly toppled over. Yes, yes, yes! I've been wishing for a mama ever since I saw you at church. Over the child's head, Willow met Preston's gaze. Then I believe we have a wedding to plan, Mr. Garrett. Indeed we do, Mrs. Zimmerman. The sooner the better, if you ask me. The news of Preston Garrett and Willow Zimmerman's engagement spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. As expected, reactions were mixed. Some, like Sheriff Miller, offered genuine congratulations. Others, led by Mrs. Parsons, whispered about unseemly haste and questioned Willow's motives in catching the wealthy newcomer. Willow found she cared less about the gossip than she'd expected. Each evening, Preston and Lily would come to her homestead for dinner, the three of them building the foundations of their future family. During the days, they worked together, preparing for both the wedding and the coming winter, harvesting gardens, preserving food, and completing final repairs on the Double G ranch house that would soon be Willow's home. 2 weeks after Preston's proposal, they were married in Silver Creek's church with Reverend Adams officiating. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Lily served as flower girl, beaming with pride as she scattered wildflower petals down the aisle. Margaret returned from Denver for the occasion, standing proudly beside her brother. To Willow's surprise, most of the town turned out for the wedding. Even Mrs. Parsons attended, though she sniffed disapprovingly at the speed of the nuptials. After the ceremony, a celebration was held at the newly completed Double G ranch house, with tables laden with food contributed by neighbors who seemed to have decided that the new family deserved their support after all. That night, after the guests had departed and Lily had finally been persuaded to go to sleep despite her excitement, Willow stood in the master bedroom, now her bedroom feeling suddenly shy. Preston entered quietly, closing the door behind him. "Are you happy, Mrs. Garrett?" he asked, coming to stand behind her and placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Willow leaned back against his chest, allowing herself to absorb his strength and warmth. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Preston turned her in his arms, his expression serious. "I want you to know something. I meant every word of my vows today. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, whatever comes, we face it together. Even if it's just the three of us forever?" Willow had to ask, needed this final reassurance. "The three of us is already more family than I dared hope for after Sarah died," Preston said softly. "You've given Lily a mother's love, and you've given me back a future I thought was lost." His hands cupped her face. "You're mine, Willow Garrett, and I'm yours. That's all that matters." As summer faded into fall, and fall gave way to winter's first snows, the Garrett family settled into a rhythm of life that felt to Willow like a dream she hadn't dared to wish for. Lily thrived under her care, soaking up knowledge like a sponge, learning to sew simple stitches, to bake bread, to read from the books Preston had brought from Denver. The ranch prospered too, with Preston's herd growing and plans laid for expansion in the spring. Winter in Colorado brought deep snows and isolation, but within the warm walls of the Double G ranch house, Willow found only joy. For the first time in her life, she experienced the true meaning of family, not defined by blood or birth, but by love freely given and received. One evening in early December, as a blizzard raged outside, the three of them sat before the fireplace, Preston whittling a wooden horse for Lily's Christmas present, Lily practicing her letters on a small slate, and Willow working on a quilt made from scraps of fabric that Margaret had sent from Denver. "Mama," Lily asked, the name still new enough to send a thrill through Willow each time she heard it, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "When you and Papa were at Mrs. Johnson's store yesterday," I heard her ask, "when you were expecting a baby." Lily's innocent gaze fixed on Willow's face. "Are we getting a baby?" Willow's hands stilled on her quilting. She glanced at Preston, who had stopped whittling to watch them both carefully. "No, sweetheart," Willow said gently. "Mrs. Johnson was mistaken. You see, some women can't have babies, and I'm one of them. The doctor told me so." Lily considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. "That's okay," she decided. "We don't need a baby, we have each other, and Papa says that's what makes a family, people who love each other." She returned to her slate, apparently satisfied. Preston reached across to squeeze Willow's hand, his eyes conveying everything words couldn't love: acceptance, contentment with their family just as it was. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Preston held Willow close as she wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she had finally found unconditional love, a man who saw her as complete, a child who accepted her as mother, a family that needed nothing more to be whole. "You're mine," Preston whispered in the darkness, echoing the words that had changed her life months before. "Just as you are." Spring came to Colorado with its usual capriciousness, warm days followed by sudden snowstorms, then sunshine again. The Double G ranch burst into activity with calving season, garden planting, and 1,000 other tasks that kept the family busy from dawn till dusk. One morning in late April, Willow woke feeling unusually queasy. She dismissed it as a passing illness, determined not to slow down during the busiest season. But when the queasiness returned day after day, always worst in the mornings, a wild, impossible hope began to form. "You should see Doc Matthews when he comes through town next week," Preston suggested as Willow picked at her breakfast, unable to face the eggs she usually enjoyed. "I'm fine," she insisted, "just tired from spring work." But the symptoms persisted, and eventually, Willow made the journey into Silver Creek to see the traveling doctor who visited the town monthly. She told him of her symptoms, but also of the Denver doctor's diagnosis 2 years earlier. "Medicine isn't an exact science, Mrs. Garrett," Doc Matthews said kindly after examining her. "Doctors can be wrong, and miracles do happen." Willow rode home in a daze, the doctor's words echoing in her mind. Could it be possible? After years of believing herself barren, after making peace with that reality and finding happiness despite it, could life have one more surprise in store? She found Preston in the barn, checking on a newborn calf. Lily was at her first day of proper school in town, the small schoolhouse having reopened after the winter closure. "Preston," she called softly from the barn door, "I need to tell you something." He looked up, concern immediately crossing his features at her serious tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" Willow stepped into the barn, the familiar smells of hay and animals surrounding them. "Doc Matthews thinks, he believes—" Her voice caught, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she needed to say. "Preston, I'm with child." For a moment, Preston stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed the barn in 3 long strides and swept Willow into his arms, lifting her off her feet in a gentle but exuberant embrace. "A baby? We're having a baby?" His voice was thick with emotion, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "But I thought you said—" "I know," Willow said, her own tears flowing freely now. "I thought it was impossible. The doctor in Denver was so certain. but Doc Matthews says sometimes these things happen without explanation. Preston set her down carefully, his hands moving to cradle her still flat stomach with reverence. "A miracle," he whispered. "Our miracle." "Are you happy?" Willow asked, suddenly uncertain. "We never planned for this. Our family was already complete with Lily." Preston's laugh was joyous and incredulous. "Happy? Willow, I'm beyond happy. I'm ecstatic." His expression sobered slightly. "But only if you are too. This changes things for you most of all." Willow placed her hands over his. "I never dared to hope for this. To be your wife and Lily's mother was already more than I thought possible. This child." She shook her head, unable to find words adequate for the emotions flooding through her. "It feels like a blessing I never deserved." "You deserve every happiness," Preston said fiercely. "And this child will be the luckiest in the world to have you as its mother, just as Lily is." That evening, they told Lily the news. Her reaction was everything they could have hoped for, wide-eyed wonder, followed by 1,000 questions about when the baby would arrive and whether it would be a brother or sister. "Either way, you'll be a wonderful big sister," Willow assured her, drawing the child into a warm embrace. "And Mama?" Lily asked, her small face suddenly serious. "Will you still love me the same when the baby comes?" Willow's heart constricted at the vulnerability in the question. "Oh, sweetheart. Love doesn't divide when it's shared, it multiplies. I'll love you just as much as I do now, forever and always. You're my first daughter, my precious gift." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer, cuddling closer into Willow's arms. Over the child's head, Willow met Preston's gaze, seeing in his eyes the same overwhelming gratitude she felt for this family they had built together, and for the unexpected blessing now growing within her. The months of Willow's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The town's reaction to the news was predictably mixed genuine congratulations from many, barely concealed surprise from others who had heard of Willow's supposed barrenness, and outright suspicion from Mrs. Parsons, who darkly suggested that the timing was convenient. But Willow found that the opinions of others mattered less and less. Her world had narrowed to the boundaries of the Double G Ranch, to the love of her husband and daughter, and to the miracle growing steadily within her. Preston was attentive to the point of overprotectiveness, constantly finding ways to lighten Willow's workload, despite her protests that pregnancy wasn't an illness. Lily appointed herself guardian of her mother's well-being, solemnly reporting to Preston if she thought Willow was doing too much. As winter approached again, the ranch was prepared with even greater care than the previous year. Extra firewood was stacked, the pantry and root cellar filled to bursting, and the bedroom next to Lily's transformed into a nursery with a cradle Preston had crafted himself from ranch timber. December brought heavy snows and the completion of Willow's pregnancy. On the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, her labor began as the first flakes of yet another blizzard began to fall. "I've sent Jimmy to fetch Doc Matthews," Preston told her as he helped her to their bed. Jimmy, a teenage boy from town, had been hired to help with the ranch work and was staying in the bunkhouse for the winter. But with the storm coming in, Willow nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. Winter births in isolated homesteads were always dangerous, and if the doctor couldn't make it through the snow. "Margaret delivered Lily," Preston said, trying to sound confident. "I remember what to do if the doctor can't get here." As the hours passed and Willow's labor intensified, it became clear that Doc Matthews would not arrive in time. The blizzard had developed into a full-blown storm, making travel impossible. Preston sent Jimmy to take Lily to the bunkhouse, wanting to spare the child from witnessing her mother's pain. Through the long night, Willow labored with Preston as her only attendant. He was steady and calm, his voice a constant reassurance as he remembered the procedures he had witnessed 6 years earlier at Lily's birth. Willow drew strength from his presence, from his unwavering belief that all would be well. As dawn approached, though the storm outside still howled, obscuring any sign of the sun, Willow felt the final urge to push. Preston positioned himself to receive the child, his face a mask of concentration and barely contained emotion. "I can see the head," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "One more push, Willow. One more." With a final monumental effort, Willow brought their child into the world, the room filled with the strong, indignant cry of new life. "A boy," Preston said, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he placed the squalling infant on Willow's chest. "We have a son." Willow gazed down at the tiny, perfect face of their miracle, red and wrinkled, and more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. "Thomas," she whispered, looking up at Preston, "after my first husband who built the homestead where we met, if that's all right with you." "Thomas Preston Garrett," Preston agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "A fine name for a fine boy." Later that morning, when the worst of the storm had passed, Jimmy brought an eager Lily to meet her new brother. The child approached the bed where Willow rested with the baby, her eyes wide with wonder. "He's so tiny," she whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's cheek. "Hello, Thomas. I'm your big sister." Preston lifted Lily onto the bed so she could sit beside Willow, creating a tableau that made Willow's heart swell with a happiness so intense it was almost painful. This was her family, the husband who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, the daughter who had accepted her with open arms, and now this son who represented a miracle she had never dared to hope for. "You're mine," Preston murmured, echoing the words that had changed everything as he sat beside them, his arm encircling Willow and Lily as they admired the newest Garrett. "All of you." The years that followed brought changes and growth to the Double G Ranch. The cattle herd prospered, and Preston expanded their operations to include horses as well. Willow's kitchen garden grew into a profitable market garden, with her vegetables and preserves becoming known throughout the county for their quality. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. To everyone's surprise, most of all, he was joined 2 years later by a sister, Emma, and 2 years after that by another brother, Samuel. Lily blossomed into a beautiful young woman, excelling in her studies and developing a talent for working with horses that made Preston burst with pride. At 18, she caught the attention of the new school teacher, a serious young man from Boston who looked at her the way Preston still looked at Willow. Silver Creek grew and changed as well. The railroad came through in 1885, bringing new settlers and opportunities. Mrs. Parsons eventually moved to Denver to live with her daughter, much to the town's collective relief. The Garrett family became respected members of the community, known for their fairness, generosity, and the obvious love that bound them together. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Preston surprised Willow with a special gift, a locket containing miniature portraits of their 4 children. "I thought you might like to keep them close to your heart," he said, as he fastened the gold chain around her neck. "Though I know they're always there anyway." Willow touched the locket, tears welling in her eyes. "I never imagined this life was possible," she said softly. "When that doctor in Denver told me I was barren, I thought no man would ever want me, that I was somehow less." Preston pulled her into his arms, his embrace as strong and reassuring as it had been on the night he first declared his love. "You were never less. You were always everything strong, beautiful, brave." He kissed her forehead. "The mother of our children is just one of the many things you are to me." That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, listening to the peaceful sounds of their sleeping household, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a woman who believed her infertility made her unlovable to the mother of 4 children, beloved wife, and mistress of a prosperous ranch. "You're mine," Preston murmured sleepily beside her, the words that had once seemed impossible, now a comfortable truth worn smooth by years of repetition. "Always and forever." "And you're mine," Willow replied, settling into the circle of his arms with the contentment of a woman who knew her worth went far beyond her ability to bear children, though that unexpected blessing would always feel like a miracle. Always and forever. Outside, the Colorado night wrapped around the Double G Ranch like a protective blanket, stars shining down on the home of a family built not just by blood, but by choice and love and the courage to believe in possibilities.